Senator Tom Cotton, who served in uniform, and he's had his eye on China his entire time in public service. Welcome, Senator. It's good to see you. During the pandemic, we promised ourselves that we would rid ourselves of the reliance on China for certain things like medicine and technology and rare minerals. How are we doing on that front?
Well, Trey, unfortunately, we're not doing so well. The Biden administration continues to erect regulatory burdens and hurdles and obstacles to doing things like making basic pharmaceuticals in this country, or semiconductor chips, or other critical goods, whether they're low-tech or whether they're high-tech, but things that are essential to our safety and our health and our prosperity. I know the Biden administration loves to throw out taxpayer cash, but on balance, those subsidies have really not done the job. But that's because their far left refuses to lower some of these regulatory burdens that companies face in bringing business back to the United States. And in fact, you see it on the new Democratic ticket, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, that Kamala Harris has chosen someone who's had a long-standing financial relationship with the Chinese Communist Party going back 35 years. He studied in China, he taught in China, he took students to China. He sometimes did that at the expense of the Chinese government, which is to say Chinese Communist Party. This is exactly the classic kind of pattern of cultivation of local elected officials or teachers or civic leaders in hopes that one day they'll go soft on China and spread that influence. And that's unfortunately what he did when he was in the House of Representatives. I worry very much about what Tim Walz will be advocating for if he becomes the vice president.
I was talking with one of your colleagues recently about Congress maybe enacting legislation now that would punish China for moving against Taiwan later on, rather than waiting and reacting afterward. Is there any discussion about deterring China now, acting proactively to kind of warn them, if you do this, it will not take us long to respond?
Well, Trey, maybe not on that specific question, but Speaker Mike Johnson just put a number of bills to a vote in the House that passed the House that would confront China in various ways, confronting it, for instance, on the intellectual property theft you talked about at the outset, protecting American safety through the Biosecure Act, which would protect genetic data, making sure that Chinese drones aren't being used in our communications infrastructure, cutting off tax credits to Chinese-made electric vehicles or vehicles that are made with components. Now, of course, a lot of Democrats oppose those things, like Alyssa Slotkin, running for Senate in Michigan, opposed the cutoff of tax credits for Chinese or for EVs made with Chinese parts. Shouldn't be surprised, because she championed a Chinese electric vehicle battery plant in Michigan, just like Gretchen Whitmer. What we need more than anything to deter a conflict over Taiwan, which is probably the hottest flashpoint in the world, is a strong military. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden for 4 years have submitted defense budgets that would cut the military in real dollars. The second thing we need is a strong president, a president who will clearly deter our adversaries. We had that with Donald Trump when we didn't have a war in Europe, and we didn't have a war in the Middle East. With Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, though, no one respects America. Certainly our adversaries don't fear America. So those are the two things we need more than anything in combination. We need a strong military once again, and we need a president who our adversaries fear and respect.
If you were the Secretary of Defense, and I think you would make quite a fine one, how do you assess the current state of our readiness? It sounds like you think a lot of things need to change to get ready for a potential conflict with China if you were Secretary of Defense, hypothetically.
Well, Trey, a lot of things do need to change in the Department of Defense to prepare and therefore hopefully deter any kind of conflict. I know that President Trump believes that, as do I. The next 4 years, we need no new wars. We need the time to rebuild our military and put it on the footing to be prepared to fight and win, and therefore avoid any future war. So just a few examples. We need a lot more focus on the kinds of weapons and resources that would be necessary for a primarily air and maritime battle in the Western Pacific. We need all of our fighting forces to be focused solely on fighting and winning wars, not on social or cultural or political indoctrination or grievances. And we need to refocus a lot of the Department of Defense's procurement practices to get it moving faster, to produce the kind of basic things that we know we're going to need no matter where we might face a conflict, like munitions and shells and so forth, and also to get it to buy the kinds of things that are cutting edge, that don't have to come from the traditional defense prime contractors that a lot of cutting edge startups are producing, but don't have a history of getting success with the Department of Defense. So those are just a few things that our military and our leadership at the Department of Defense needs to do over the next 4 years to prevent a war in the Western Pacific over Taiwan.
I know you love Arkansas, but my bet is at some point, some Republican president in the future is going to ask you to maybe consider moving to the Pentagon. But we shall see if I live long enough to see that happen. Tom Cotton from the great state of Arkansas, thank you for joining us on a Sunday night.
Thank you, Trey.